This is going to be the Rickard's Callibaetis. It's a great still water pattern. Not too difficult to tie, only a few materials really needed. I've got a size 16 nymph hook, barbless, in the vise. I'm using some orange 18-aught nano silk. It just ends up blending in a little bit because we're going to use some Woodduck colored mallard. She can keep that straight. Obviously Woodducks are a kind of duck, but this is a Woodduck or a Mallard Flank feather that's Woodduck color for both the tail and for kind of a wing case over the top of the hook. And this is the Mallard Flank in the Woodduck color. Where I got a little bunch here for my tails. I want those tails to be about the length of the shank of the hook, so I'll try to take that measurement that way and tie it in here at the back of my hook. And as usual, I'll start by turning my thread counterclockwise so that thread jumps towards my fingers instead of towards the eye of the hook. But I like to get a wrap or two on it and check length before I really secure it down. And it doesn't need to be a very long tail, so that's looking just about right to me. I'm going to go ahead and leave that flank in place as I tie up towards the eye, just to build up a little bit of extra bulk. We'll be putting a dubbing and a ribbing and a hackle on all of this, so that probably isn't nearly as important in terms of building the bulk, but it's a good habit to have. For ribbing, I'm just going to use brassie-sized copper wire. I'm going to attach that on my side of the hook, start taking a few wraps back, and then I'll just draw that material backwards. I'm going to tie that back nearly to the tails, but not quite all the way to the tail. I lied. I'm going to tie it all the way back to where we're going to have the abdomen start. When you start getting a little bit older, you start forgetting what pattern you're tying. And I thought I was tying something different for a second. So from here we're just going to turn right back to that Mallard Flank in the Woodduck color. I kind of cut the tips off of this just so that I have a little bit thicker fibers here. I'm going to secure that down to the hook. Most important here is to kind of hold this upwards because we want this to be on top of the hook. It's going to fold all the way over the top, kind of in this fashion, to be kind of a wing case or just a covering over the top of the pattern. So we'll just tie that back right where we want that abdomen to start. For dubbing, I'm just going to use some natural hares here. Let's go ahead and finger dub this on. This will have maybe a little bit of a taper, but not much of a taper. It's going to have a fairly consistent body. So I've left a little bit of empty thread just to allow me to take a few turns back towards the tail, and then we'll just begin working our way forward. I'll be reaching in as I usually do and tightening things up a little bit as we go along. And like I said, it's okay to have a little bit of a taper here, but I'm not really searching for one of those extraordinary tapers that we often see on different patterns that we tie. And once I get up behind the eye there, I'm just going to kind of pull some of those fibers back with my fingers. I don't mind if this is a little bit buggy, but I'm going to go ahead and clean out a couple of those longer fibers. From here we'll just tie in a piece of grizzly hackle. So and get that to stand straight up. This hackle I want to be a little bit smaller than what you would usually use for a size 16. It's just going to give us kind of a spiky little body, and we're going to tie it a little bit woolly bugger style, in terms of we're going to take the turns back down towards the bend of the hook, and then I'm going to use my copper wire to secure that in place. So once I've got that tied in, we'll just come on in with our scissors and snip off that stem. From here, we're just going to go ahead. I've just put my bobbin on my bobbin cradle just so I can use both hands. Just going to attach my hackle plier. We're going to hold that straight up. We're going to get at least one good wrap right around the front here. And then we'll start taking fairly open spiral grabs. Really, hopefully, 4 or 5 is all you need here. Make sure you avoid the hook point, especially when you get back here towards the back end. It'll go right through the stem of that grizzly hackle there, so I'm going to kind of exaggerate and go around it, come back, and then we'll just take one more turn. So with that in place, I'm going to keep the tension on this hackle. I'm going to grab my copper wire that we tied in originally. I'm going to take that right over the top of that hackle. And then I'm just going to start moving that copper wire in open spiral wraps towards the front of the hook. You will probably trap a few fibers. I can actually let go of my hackle at this point. But I found that if you just kind of work your way through it, it actually comes out just as well as if you were trying to fight, not trapping any hackle fibers whatsoever. Most of them will spring right back into position, so you don't end up trapping as many as you would think. With that, I'll go ahead and remove my thread from my bobbin cradle, so that we can tighten up our thread and we can secure this end of the copper. So I'll just take a wrap or two over the top of that. Maybe try to pull some of this back as I get a couple of wraps in front of it as well. With that, we'll just go ahead and turn our vise a little bit, and we'll rock this copper wire back and forth, spin it around, and let the friction break that off nice and clean. And at this point, I can also come in at this back end and do the very best that I can to just cut the stem of my hackle feather off back here. So at this point, we're going to now take this mallard wing case and we're going to pull it over the top of our hook here. I'll just take a wrap or two to make sure I have that secured in place. I'll probably take a wrap right behind the eye before I clip the balance of this off. I'm going to want to cut this off fairly tight. This is a spot where you want to have a good set of scissors. From there, we're just going to go ahead, grab our whip finisher, take a few turns, trying not to capture. Of course, there's got to be one. And that is why we have tweezers. I know I say that a lot, but it's quite true. Grab my thread cutter and turn the vise to kind of where that thread is. Release our thread. Come in here with my tweezers. I'll just grab this one. That kind of poked out on us, and that's it. Like I said, a great stillwater fly pattern. The Rickard's Callibaetis, kind of fun to tie, pretty easy to tie if you're a beginner and just learning. So grab a hook, throw it in your vise, and give this one a shot.